Hello, students. I want to go over some student examples of capstone projects from previous quarters. These are going to be examples that I'm going to point out some things that I want to see and some things that could be added into it. So hopefully this will be helpful for you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Share screen here. Let's go to iPad. Okay, so what you see on your screen is one example. Actually, let me make sure I got to start at the top, sorry. So I'm going to show you two student examples, and then I'm also going to go over another example that shows you kind of the process of how you can dive into your study. But the cover page is always included when you turn in your capstone project, your summary. So as you're going through this cover page and I ask you to put a check mark next to what's been completed, only put a check mark next to what you have found in your study. So if you do not have confidence intervals in your study, then you're not going to put a check mark next to confidence intervals. This check mark is to make sure you hit most of these topics. You will probably not hit every single one, but you will hit most of the topics. So this example is not correct because this student did not hit every single one of these topics. So just make sure that that's what I mean by a completed topic. Put an X in front of each completed topic. That means what you have done. So it just gives you a way to organize it and make sure you've looked for all of these topics. This is also a really good place to go when you're looking for a study because you want to hit almost all of these topics, maybe not every single one, but really most of these topics. Okay, so that would be your cover page. And then we're just going to go through this and I'm just going to highlight some things that are relevant here. So the first paragraph, you talk about what the study is, why you chose it, and you also, I have in here what needs to happen in each paragraph, so you'll be able to identify that. But the first paragraph, I'm just going to bring your eyes where it says the population. So the population that was targeted from this experiment was healthy young female adults between the ages of 18 and 22 with BMI above 29.9 kilograms per millimeter squared. So it's really detailed on what the population is. It's not just population of young, healthy female adults. It really is specific to what this study is and the population that it targets. It also lists the sample and says there's 30 of these healthy women. So that also is a detail that would need to be included. There's explanatory variables and response variables. So this is a good way to explain in detail how to identify the explanatory and the response variables. This study was a cross-sectional and done in completely randomized design. So when you do write about what kind of study is, you need to explain why it is that study, not just say that it is, but why it is that study. She's identified experimental units. She's indicated there was not a placebo group or control group. This next part where it says the data measured at an interval level and is continuous quantitative data. So you need to explain that more. She just says from results of blood pressure and heart rate measurements, that's not enough. So if you're identifying it as interval, why is this an interval level of measurement? So you have to go back into your notes probably and refresh your memory on what interval level is and how that applies to this particular study. So this would not be adequate in the sense that you would want to identify what interval level is and how it applies to this study. Continuous quantitative data, also, why is it continuous quantitative? Why isn't it discrete quantitative, or why is it not qualitative data? So you need to really be clear on those. Talks about random sampling here, but it doesn't really describe, it just says it was the method used, but why? Why and how Was random sampling used in this study? Explain it in detail. So this one continues to go on with the mean and the standard deviation, giving all the mean and standard deviation. And this particular one has several measurements. So they're looking at systolic, diastolic blood pressure, and then they're also looking at the diastolic blood pressure at baseline. And then the heart rate, individual's heart rate. So that's good. That gives a lot of detail there and talks about for each one the mean and standard deviation. But you also probably want to explain a little more about standard deviation. So standard deviation is the average spread of the data from the mean. So maybe a comparison and contrast even, but you need a little bit more detail besides just stating, here's the mean, here's the standard deviation. Okay, great. What does that mean? How does that apply? And what does standard deviation actually really mean? And I'm not talking about listing a definition. So that would be not what I want you to, I mean, you can include the definition, but that's also not enough. It needs to be a definition that's applied to this particular study and what it means in this study, how it relates in application to that. She gives another sentence here that says these results show a slight increase and then a decrease in the systolic blood pressure throughout the experiment. It shows an increase in the diastolic blood pressure and then a decrease throughout the experiment. There is a table. So if there is a table, you need to include the table. If for me to go into your study and try to find a specific table and then flip back into your summary is not enough. It really is important that you include the table and then you describe the table that's right there in front of you. So insert the table into your work and then talk about the meaning of that. Provided the study displays the mean, the standard deviation, and the p-values for the values measured in the experiment. So again, it's just listing that they're there, but the table is not included. So I have a hard time deciding on that. Okay, I don't know if you can see my cat up there, but he's being super naughty. I need to grab it. Henry, put down. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Okay, there's your entertainment of the day. Okay, anyways, just listing is not enough. You have to interpret and explain. That's the purpose of this, is identify the mean, the standard deviation, identify the p-value, and interpret what that means. Saying there's a table is not enough. I need to see the table, and then you need to be specifically including and interpreting that table. There's an indication that there's no confidence intervals. So sometimes you don't have confidence intervals in your study. So I would definitely make sure that you don't put the X on that cover sheet if there's no confidence intervals in your study. It says, but there is a level of significance of 0.05. This means the statements are rejected if the p-value is less than 0.05. Okay, so that does give an indication of rejection or not rejection, but rejection of what? What are the statements? What are the statements? You know, specifically, even if it doesn't say the null hypothesis is and the alternative is, you should be able to identify at least what the claim is that is being rejected. So the statements are rejected is not enough. What is being rejected? Talk about what the claim is and how that p-value is supports the alternative or not. So again, just more information application on what the p-value means and according to what the claim is. Talks about limitations of the study and the paragraph there with the works cited. Okay, so that's one example. Let me take you through another one. So this one was shorter, and I don't think that I really have to get my cat. I'm so sorry. Okay. So this is really not what I wanted to happen today. I don't know, when my cat doesn't want attention, or I mean wants attention, this is what happens. Okay, so here we go. This study, what I was trying to tell you is this study is maybe this write-up is not very long, but it doesn't have to be super long. It needs to definitely have these paragraphs. So paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4. So it definitely has to have those 4 specific paragraphs. As long as it has the detail and the information, it doesn't have to be very long. This one could definitely improve with including the table and be more specific in some of the cases, in some of the terminology, not just stating it, but explaining it as well. Okay, let's go to this next example. So again, this person also clicked all or put an X on all of these. I see there's not one here, so maybe she didn't identify what kind of study it was. And there's not one here again. So, and the hypothesis test. So, well, I'm not sure in the study if she didn't identify those. I think that if you don't identify them, you should write what happened, why they're not in your study. So next to that, I would give a reason. Okay, so this first paragraph here, it does talk about the objectives of the analysis, and this is to describe UK maternal mortality rates in different age, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups between 2009 and 2017, and to identify whether there was changes in observed inequalities or different trends amongst population subgroups. It lists the sample, it lists the population, and the sample has been divided further into subgroups. It says this is a cohort study, but it doesn't really give a valid explanation. It just says because it's not experimental or observed. This is not correct. So you have to say why it's a cohort study. And this actually would be an observational study because they're looking at data over the years of 2009 through 2017, and they didn't do any treatments. They just observed and took statistics on it. Okay, list the explanatory variable and the response variable. The data is quantitative because it can be counted or measured. That's not enough. That's just a definition, and that doesn't explain what data. There's so much data because there's the explanatory variable is the woman that's pregnant. And I don't know what that's measuring. It just says a woman's pregnant, so that doesn't really tell me what it's measuring. The response variable are those who died and their race, their age, and their wealth. So all of those are different variables. So they all aren't quantitative. Race is definitely not quantitative. That would be qualitative. Your age is quantitative. So you need to identify each of those variables and if they're qualitative or quantitative and the reason why they are. So explain why you think they're quantitative or why they're qualitative. The level of measurement, again, this is something that probably needs to be looked up again because it's been a while since we talked about nominal, ratio, and interval. So first there's nominal, ordinal, and then ratio and interval. Those are the 4 levels of measurement. So identify what level of measurement these variables are and explain why. It says it uses a 95% confidence interval, but it doesn't really explain what the 95% confidence interval is about. 95 confidence interval on what? I am 95% confident that the true population of age falls between this group, or what are they measuring? 95% interval for what? Again, 95% confidence interval. Yeah. There's no evidence, so you need to explain. I don't know what that means. No evidence or significant relative risk. So why? If there's no evidence, then we need to talk about a p-value, or I'm not sure what that means. So, but in a confidence interval, we would talk about if it falls inside or outside the interval. So it's not really clear. It's almost like there's just some copying of what was in the study and putting it in here. And then it says when analyzing maternal mortality rate, see figure 1. Okay, so she does have down at the bottom figure 1. So I have to go to figure 1 and then I have to look at it here. So it would be a lot better if you're going to talk about figure 1. So she indicated figure 1 right here. So if she indicates figure 1 right here, then put the figure in here and discuss it so that it's right there and I can see that you're analyzing that diagram and the graph or the table, whatever it is that you are choosing to include. There's another figure here. So again, put that figure in and then discuss it instead of just putting it at the end. Talks about the x-axis and the explanatory variable, the y-axis and the response variable, and it actually gives what those variables represent. Talks about the graph. Again, if it talks about a graph, then include it right here so that it makes sense and I can look at it and see how it's being interpreted. It talks about the increasing trend, gives you a p-value. So still a little bit confusing because it's evidence of increasing trend in mortality, maternal mortality. So she's talking about a p-value, but then she hasn't talked about what is the claim. What is the claim that's being rejected, or what is the claim that is not being rejected? What's being supported? There's just not enough information here. And again, p-values and p-values, but not enough information describing and interpreting. So that's your goal of this study. Your biggest goal is to identify things we've learned in our class and then interpret them, not just copying what the study is saying, but being able to interpret and apply all of these words that you've learned, all the terminology that you've learned, and also to apply, we've learned the whole entire quarter has been leading up to this moment. So you've learned so many different statistics and inference statistics that now is the time to show what you know and what you've learned. And then at the end of the study, she talks about some lurking variables. Like I said, the figures are at the end, but I want them included when you start talking about them. They need to be included as you talk about them. And then the citation at the end. And so those are a couple examples of student work. Let me now bring you into a process. So a process that one of my students included. This is not something you have to include, and actually I don't really need it, but this just gives you an idea of the work that goes into actually coming up with the write-up. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down past here. So he's done all of the work here. I'm going to get to where the study is. Okay, so he included a study, which I don't need, but what I want you to notice is he's gone through all of this, highlighted, written comments on the side. Okay, so you can see the comments on the side over here. More highlighting, more comments, all kinds of comments on the side here. So this is how he is going to create his write-up, is he's reading through here, highlighting and identifying things and putting notes next to it. So it's helpful when he goes to write his final write-up for the capstone project. Okay, more notes. There's some tables and graphs, tons of notes over here with more highlighting. So going through this in detail, looks like he's highlighted a lot of this stuff here too, just to understand it. Talking about where he could put this particular discussion in paragraph 4, it looks like. So he really took a lot of effort and time. This is what I expect, and this is what is going to create your write-up, is if you dive into your study and really investigate what the terminology is that how it applies to your study, and how you can explain it and talk about it in your write-up. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful on what some of the expectations are. I apologize again for my crazy cat, and I hope that you have a great experience with this. This is the place where you can shine the most. You've learned so much. You should be so proud of yourself. This class has a lot in it, but you've come full circle now, And now is the time to really illustrate all that you've learned.